Dale Pinnock, welcome to my podcast. I want to live to 100. Please tell me how. Someone I know, I've had a relationship with you for many years now. I bought your books long before I knew you. And I know that you've helped us seasonally, my wife and myself, when we've gone through stuff where nutrition was super important to us, making sure we were getting the right thing. But goodness me, Dale, it's getting complicated out there.
It can be. I mean, the weird thing is I've been in the industry for 30 years and 2 degrees and a master's in the subject, and all the only one thing that I realised at the end of it is how little we know and how much more there is that we need to know. Yeah, it's a difficult one. So I feel sorry for the layperson in this day and age.
Well, I mean, and this is why we've got you here, right? You know, I value your input always in it when it comes to nutrition, but it's not just my day to day that I want to start talking about, you know, as in what I'm putting in my body and everything like that. I want to know that, you know, because we look at certain things, obviously, when we look back in the past and go, oh, you need to get that in your body. Now they're going, no, you don't. Actually, you need this in your body. Where are we with those basics right now that we should be focusing on?
Basics have never changed. The thing is, I mean, one of the unfortunate thing is anyone that has worked in PR for longer than 10 seconds or had any dealings with PR know that everything needs an angle, everything needs a story. If you've ever worked with a journalist, they need a story. They can't just say, eat lots of plants, good quality protein, and not eat processed crap, because it's not sexy, it's not click worthy, it's not a headline. The basics have not changed. A good whole foods, minimally processed diet is the absolute foundation. Of course there's nuance in there. Of course there's actually some degree of variation, especially if you're working with specific conditions. My whole thing of nutrition really is nutritional medicine. So I work with people that are managing certain diseases or trying to reverse certain things, and we would manipulate their diet accordingly. So of course there's nuance there. But in terms of the day-to-day stuff that we all should be doing, that's not changed since the day we stopped slithering along the ground. You know, from an evolutionary point of view, it's just like plants, animal foods, and that's it. And you can have you can have any variation of that according to your own ethics or preferences or whatever, but that's it. It's just getting back to those basics.
Do you know, and I think that is the thing, that is one of the things I'm seeing in the wellness industry as a whole. We forget we're being marketed to so much.
Yeah.
Like everyone is trying to sell us something. That's why they use these scare tactics. In fact, I was hosting an event last week in London, and one of the people there had an intimate dinner. There was only, I think, 6 or 8 of them in total, with Brian Johnson, you know, the guy that's spending millions on living.
Yeah,
Right?
he's an interesting chap.
But do you know what? You know, he went in there with one sort of thought as to what he was going to be like and who he was going to be like, and actually thought, no, he's a really, really decent guy. He said, but one thing he said to the table was, if I just told everyone basically what to do, it wouldn't be sexy. I wouldn't get the traction. People wouldn't listen to me. But when I use terms like don't die and things like that, then it becomes interesting. And that's it. You know, we're all vying for people's attention now. Unfortunately, what is actually good for us gets lost in all that noise. Whoever shouts the loudest, right? I remember your first book I got, it was actually The Medicinal Chef. And literally, God knows how many years. When was that out, Dale? How many years ago?
That came out 2013.
Right. Literally, Andrea, my wife, cooked that soup, the chili one, right, 2 weeks ago.
That's the soup that launched my career, thanks to Chris Evans.
I love that soup. Love that soup. But, you know, going back to what you're saying about getting the basics right and things like that, that's really great to hear that it can be that simple. And something that I sort of follow is I try and do more good than not. And the reason I say more good than not rather than more good than bad, because even a pizza with friends and a glass of wine, right, is the right thing for you at certain times.
Yeah.
It is just about that balance, isn't it? And my focus is to sort of aim for a percentage around 85 to 90% of what goes in my body is good for me. And with that, I look at, you know, getting protein in. I look at getting lots of variety of plant foods in. And one of the things I've started learning more about plant foods is I always thought it was vegetables, you know, but it's vegetables, it's fruit, it's seeds, nuts, spices. You know, there's actually a lot when people talk about plant that you can be putting in your diet, isn't
Let
there?
me tell you, I mean, that whole moniker of the medicinal chef, it came from the fact that plant foods particularly can be like an edible medicine chest, and they link very well into a lot of these kind of anti-aging conversations as well, because their phytochemistry is very, very interesting. They contain compounds that aren't nutrients. You can't be deficient in them. There's not like a day-to-day minimum requirement for them, but they can actually have pharmacological effects on a multitude of different chemical pathways in your body. And when you understand that and you can use that to your advantage, then it becomes very, very interesting.
Do you know, one of the things I notice in the work that I do in my day job, I work with a lot of high performers, and they will like grab onto the fact that that's good for me, that's good for me, that's good for me, and they start putting it into these like insane shakes that have got God knows how many ingredients in. And one of them I pointed out, I said, you're probably causing so much like bloating and fermenting in your stomach with all the products that you're putting in. There is such thing as too much goodness, isn't there? Certainly in one sitting.
I think that's probably easier to do with supplements than with whole foods,
Right.
because we remember your body always moves towards homeostasis in every single situation. And every single situation is regulated by those homeostatic mechanisms, including the absorption of certain nutrients.
Okay, so
When
for
there
the
is an ex
layman's term, Dale, what does that mean, homeostasis?
homeostasis is the constant striving towards balance.
Right, okay.
Okay.
And is
So,
that
for
where you get to
example,
a point
if we're
where
producing too much of a hormone, if we produce too much of a hormone, then the receptor that listens to that hormone will start to become less active. If the receptors aren't working properly, we'll ramp up the production of the hormone. It's that seesaw of like the body changing in accordance to maintain its normal function, adapting to its environment to maintain its normal function. So if you're absolutely caning loads of vitamin C rich foods, the absorption sites for vitamin C will regulate themselves. If you're taking very, very high pharmaceutical doses of certain nutrients, which I do, by the way, and I'm a massive fan of, but you've got to know what you're doing. You've got to understand the nuance. Then you can tip the scale. Then you do run the risk of getting more of certain nutrients in circulation, etc., etc. So yes, you could probably cause digestive upset if you went a bit mental with one of those smoothies. But from the point of view of it being too much,
yeah.
it's very difficult to overdo it with whole foods.
Well, that sort of leads me on to obviously one of the things here is this podcast is sponsored by the medical travel company, and we're going to talk about them. We'll do the advert for them a bit later on. But one of the things that they pride themselves for is testing. And when I was following like what I thought was a really, really good diet to not only help me today, but to help me sort of in my aging process. And I was hearing it everywhere on social media was just how much protein I should be taking per how much I weigh and how much exercise I'm doing. But that nuance of what you're talking about of maybe like where I was tipping the scales too much, I ended up getting gout. And I was getting symptoms of gout for ages. And I'd been to the doctor, I'd had blood tests and everything. And it actually became quite a joke between my wife and my friends because gout is associated with indulgence, overeating, over drinking, those sorts of things, which anyone that knows me will know that's not what I'm about. But it was
You've not got a
because I
heavy
did the
plate, but
testing, indeed, but it's because I had the testing that I was able to join the dots, and I could see that some of my genes, I was predispositioned to actually not being able to metabolize certain elements of my food as well as others. And putting too much protein in caused one of those issues to manifest as gout.
yeah. Well, gout is basically it comes from there's like metabolic byproducts in certain foods called purines. Okay, we've got it in our we have purines in our own cells. We find it in a lot of meats, particularly the fattier cuts of meat, and particularly organ meats, but not exclusively. I mean, they're all over the place. When we can't break those down properly, you start to get an excess of uric acid. And uric acid can then, when it's in excess, start to crystallize in joints. And when it crystallizes in joints, it can be like a dagger going into things like the cartilage, like the
Mm.
synovium, some of these delicate structures within the joints. And anyone that's ever had it knows that you could drop a tissue on it and it would be agony. Yeah, it's
Okay.
very, very painful. I've worked with a lot of people in clinic with it. And understanding your body's own ability to be able to handle purines can help you to manipulate your diet accordingly.
Well, that in itself, going back about the pain thing, I couldn't even put my blooming sheet on my foot. It felt like I'd
Very
broken my
common.
foot.
Yeah.
It was insane. Well, it's let me tell you what I sort of eat in a day, right? And then just from your point of view, give me some guidance as to, okay, that will help you age. Actually, maybe adjust this, because I'm sure everyone's sitting here listening, going, okay, great, we can follow the basics. But even we forget now that some people get confused with what those basics are, and process, ultra process, and those sorts of things. So
No worries.
an average day for me is, so I call it breakfast, right? I generally eat around about 11, 12 o'clock. And so I will have 2 eggs, be them poached, scrambled, something like that. I have them on a couple of bits of sourdough. I top it with some hummus or some guacamole. And I tend to, if Andrea cooks, she'll cook me some fresh asparagus and some mushrooms. If it's me, I just get some sardines and put them on the side. And that's sort of breakfast taken care of. How does that sound so far for starting the day?
Well, that's great. I mean, do you want me to go down the rabbit hole straight away with it and link it to some of the aging issues?
Go for it.
Right. Firstly, you've got some good quality protein balanced with high fiber carbohydrate sources. From a metabolic point of view, that's ticking a few boxes. Firstly, when you're combining these slow release carbohydrates, the high fiber plants and good quality proteins and some healthy fats, you're creating a meal that takes quite a lot of digestive effort to actually liberate its glucose content. And so that means it's going to be drip feeding your blood sugar. Yeah, excited about this stuff. It drip feeds your blood sugar instead of carpet bombing it. So that means your blood sugar levels stay really quite stable. And there's some really important things that happen there. Firstly, just from an energy point of view, it helps to keep your energy levels quite sustained because you don't get the peaks and troughs. You don't get that blood sugar roller coaster. But from a long-term health point of view, when you're doing that consistently, if you were following a diet that was, I mean, think about like the typical breakfast in this country, like a bowl of crappy cereal and a slice of white toast and probably a sugary cup of tea, that's going to push blood sugar up really, really high, really, really quickly. If this happens once in a while, like once a week, you have a bit of chocolate, no big deal, no issue. Your body can deal with it. It produces insulin. Insulin tells the cells there's additional glucose. The cells take up the glucose. Job done. There we go. But if it's happening 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, 12 months a year, then you start to get some metabolic breakdown. Firstly, you're at greater risk of type 2 diabetes because when you're constantly pushing up blood glucose that much, you're pushing up insulin. And remember earlier, we talked about homeostasis. If you're constantly firing out very, very high levels of insulin, after a while, insulin receptors start to think that maybe your pancreas has lost its mind and then starts to ignore it a little bit. So you get insulin resistance,
Right.
and that can actually compound things. Secondly, that blood glucose, basically when the insulin signal's sent, the cells will take up some of that glucose and store it. But cells can only take up so much in a short period of time because any excess will actually cause glucose toxicity. So they shut the door, they shut the glucose transporters. If blood glucose is still too high, still got to be dealt with because glucose that's too high or too low, equally life-threatening states. So once cells are full, the next thing that happens is we replenish our glycogen stores. And that's the actual form of glucose that we store in muscle and in the liver. Of only a very, very small capacity to do that. So that's the next thing that will happen. If at that point blood glucose is still elevated, it's got to be dealt with. So it gets sent to the liver and converted into triglycerides. This is a storage form of energy. Those triglycerides are what fill our fat cells. So we actually start to gain weight, particularly gaining visceral fat. So visceral fat starts to increase, as does subcutaneous, but that fat has to, those triglycerides have to get to the fat tissue via the circulation. So your blood lipids go up. That means cholesterol ratios change. Your LDL to HDL ratios go all over the place. Your triglycerides go up. Your inflammatory load against the endothelium, the lining of the blood vessel, increases, which increases your risk of cardiovascular disease. So that's just the first thing, Nick. Then the second thing, you've got
And
some
this
lovely
is all from cereal, right? And
that's
the
just right.
dodgy
No,
and
so
the
this is
white
just that
bread.
combination you've got. You've got that really good quality protein, the slow burning carbohydrates. You're drip feeding your blood glucose. You're avoiding all of those situations when you're consistently eating like that. Secondly, you've got one of the most important dietary components on that plate: long chain omega-3 fatty acids from the sardines. Right now, omega-3, one of the my first soapbox before we kind of go to You hear people say, "Oh, eat chia seeds, eat walnuts. Oh, walnuts are good for your brain. There's loads of omega-3 in there." Omega-3 isn't one single substance. It's an entire family of fatty acids. And fatty acids, by the way, they're vitamin-like substances derived from dietary fats that have got some vital roles to play in the body. Now, there's a whole family of omega-3: EPA, DHA, ALA, DPA. In plants like walnuts, flax seeds, all the rest of it, the omega-3 exists in the form of ALA. In the human body, there's only two that influence our physiology at all, and that's EPA and DHA. ALA from plants needs to go through significant enzymatic conversion to be turned into those long-chain EPA and DHA fatty acids that we can actually use. Human beings are terrible at doing that conversion. Only a few percentage points of conversion, apart from pregnant women that can ramp it up to about 25%. The reason they're important is because when we metabolize these key fatty acids like EPA and DHA, the metabolic end products that are produced can help to influence inflammation. I mean, they've got several roles to play, but one of the main roles that these metabolic end products play is regulating the inflammatory response. Okay, they get turned into groups of substances called icosanoids. So EPA, icosa, pentanoic acid. So you can see the nomenclature going there. Anyway.
By the way, I
They
hope
get
everyone's
converted into
staying with
these.
me on this, right? Because it is like some of the things that Dale mentions, I'm like, what does that mean? What does that mean? Is that good or bad? Keep it simple,
You
Dale,
can
for
always
me.
listen back. That's the thing. You can always go like, dare you to try and do a transcript with this one. So these icosanoids, some groups of icosanoids switch inflammation on, and that tends to be the group that come from excess omega-6 fatty acids. That's partly where the seed oils conversation comes from. Or other groups actually reduce inflammation, and that's the group that comes from things like oily fish. So that's your EPA and your DHA. Why does that matter from an aging and disease prevention point of view? Chronic subclinical inflammation is the number one driver of degenerative illness. So whether you're dealing with metabolic illnesses, whether you're dealing with cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, cancers, all of those things, inflammation is a core part of the pathophysiology. Unchecked chronic inflammation over long periods of time is a core part of the physiology. And this is something that you'll find in any A-level pathology textbook, this next statement. So it's not me being kind of, OTT or making any kind of weird blanket statement. Chronic inflammation over time can alter genetic expression to a point that it can instigate cancer. It's one of the, and you look at the the key carcinogens, whether we're talking cigarette smoke or traffic fumes or whatever, it's because they cause that chronic inflammatory irritation in tissues consistently.
So from someone
Good
listening,
intake,
so from
yeah, good
someone
intake of
listening
those
to
long chain
this,
omega-3 fatty acids really helps to buffer inflammation, as does that low glycemic effect. So that's breakfast.
okay, but if someone's listening is just going, I couldn't stomach sardines at the best of time, let
Salmon,
alone in the morning.
mackerel, yeah,
What
salmon, mackerel, herrings, or if you really can't stand any fish, a good quality supplement. But you need the supplement to be EPA and DHA, not just generic fish oil, because that could be anything. That could be anyone's guess. Look at the label. EPA around about 750 milligrams per capsule. DHA around 250 milligrams per capsule.
nice.
That would be what you would add. Ideally, get it from the fish first, but not everyone likes fish. So.
No, and I get that. I am slightly weird in what I eat for breakfast, and some people have told me so on Instagram, so it must be true.
That sounds
Right?
good to me.
But so my next thing, we call it my second meal because it's not at lunch, right? But like,
So you're like a hobbit. You have second breakfast.
I sometimes have two in one go. It depends how hungry I am, But so I'll have kefir yogurt, and I tend to either put chia and flax on or pumpkin seeds on. Then I put a little bit of like an Alpen type thing, right, with different bits in. A granola that's as low in sugar as possible, but not a low sugar one, right? So it's not low sugar or zero sugar. It's just not that much sugar in. Then I put like a combination of some nuts on, which I crush up, generally walnuts, some cashews, some almonds, that sort of thing. Then I put raspberries, blueberries, banana. I then put olive oil over it.
What was you saying about people overdoing it in a smoothie then?
Oh, I know. Am I that guy, right? And then I'd put some cinnamon. And if I'm feeling a little bit sweet tooth, I might have a bit of local honey. I mean, is that gonna blow me out the water?
So look, I mean, the first thing that's really obvious with that is you're going to be doing the microbiome a lot of good. There's a lot of fiber in there. There's the probiotic element to the kefir. There's also lots of polyphenols that you find in the berries. All of those things help to support the microbiome. By obviously, if no one's heard of it, I mean, wherever you've been, but it's the microbial colony in our gut that we have that symbiotic relationship with. Apart from the live bacteria that's coming in from the kefir, the polyphenols that you're actually getting from the berries, these are actually bactericidal substances, which may sound kind of counterintuitive when we're kind of thinking about gut bacteria, but they're bactericidal against many like dysbiotic organisms, many of the kind of bacteria that can come into the body that can cause problems. And because of that, they actually create a more favorable environment for the good bacteria. But then obviously they benefit the cardiovascular system and loads of other things. So you're supporting your microbiome. You have got an incredible phytonutrient density going on there. I mean, we spoke about polyphenols that are berries. So those are the color pigments in berries. When you think things like blueberries, blackberries, those deep color pigments, that's your polyphenols. Also find it in cocoa, red onions, red wine. They're quite ubiquitous in the plant world. But apart from supporting the microbiome, they're fantastic for cardiovascular health. There's been a lot of work done at the University of Reading under Professor Jeremy Spencer, and they've looked at ever increasing consumption, like increasing doses of polyphenol consumption and continued improvements in cardiovascular function. Now, earlier on when I was talking about inflammation, I mentioned something called the endothelium. When we look at our blood vessels, it's not just a simple muscular tube. Yeah, I mean, it is a muscular tube, but there's a skin that lines the inside that isn't just a simple lining. It's actually a highly metabolically active tissue that regulates what the rest of the blood vessels doing. It regulates circulatory dynamics. Now, one of the things that the endothelium does is secrete a gas called nitric oxide. And nitric oxide leaves the endothelium, goes into the muscular wall of the blood vessel and causes relaxation of the fibers that make up the vessel wall. So it dilates the vessel, enhances circulation to the extremities, and lowers blood pressure. But nitric oxide also protects the endothelium from damage. Damage to the endothelium is what kickstarts heart disease. Those plaques in the arteries, it's not just circulating cholesterol that got bored and burrowed in there. It's because there's actually vascular injury in the first place. The polyphenols in berries get taken up by endothelial cells, the cells that make up that line. And once inside those cells, the polyphenols cause metabolic distress. So they stress the cells out a little bit and actually increase the production and secretion of nitric oxide. So you enhance that protective effect. So that's coming from your berries. From the nuts and the seeds, you've got some really important trace elements. You've got zinc. So for us blokes, I mean, zinc's important anyway. Zinc regulates the white blood cells. Zinc actually helps to manufacture genes that our white blood cells use to control the way in which they respond to pathogens. So it's almost like zinc helps to write the software that drives the hardware for those. For us blokes, zinc's really important for testosterone synthesis and metabolism as well.
Okay.
So you're getting a good whack of that there. Good second breakfast.
Thank you. Well, and you know what? I'm just gonna, I'm going to tell you what I have for the next 2 meals in one go, because we've already touched on one. I have some of your soup, or I have a version of that soup, which you already know has got all the incredible goodness in it. We got and again, it's very seasonal, right? You got all the root vegetables and everything.
There's some mad stuff going on in that. Some real good functional ingredients.
It really is. And then I'll finish off with either a bit of chicken, veg, potatoes, or last night I had new potatoes, a bit of steak, and some broccoli.
That is my perfect dinner. That's almost like my typical dinner as well. Yeah, I mean, you're doing all the right things. You're covering so many nutritional bases. You're not just like protein at every single meal like so many people do. You've got one of the real keys sus. You've got that broad intake of whole foods across the day. And that's the key.
Yeah. I think one of the things, like I said, I focus on 85 to 90% of being good in my body, right? And my goal is 40 different plants a week.
Okay.
Right. And therefore, for example, what that makes me think is get out the habit that many of us go through is eating the same thing. Right. If we make a salad, it's the same.
That's what the same thing looks like. Now, here's a little thing.
Okay.
Here's a little thing. Now, obviously Dr. Megan Rossi, like know
Yeah.
her very, very well. Professor Tim Spector, he actually taught me when I was on my master's, so I know Tim very, very, very well. And they talk about 30 plants a week. That numerical value is really just to inspire people to get more and more of these plants in.
Okay.
There's only so many phytochemicals that exist in the world, so many nutrients. You're probably getting everything that you need to get when there's plant diversity. But when you've got that anchor in your mind of a certain number, it just pushes you to strive towards variety. And that's all that matters. Variety matters. There isn't an exact number.
That's really good to hear, because funny enough, what it does actually make me do is I mean, none of these numbers I get obsessed over. If I have 25 one week and 40, but again, it's an ideal situation. And this is what I want people listening to this. Don't start fixating on 30 or 40. Just try and get as many different colors in as possible. But one of the reasons I love it, and also Andrea, is because it just makes us look at cooking different things. Even our children, and that's the thing, our children, one point, they stated, they did an intervention and basically went,
threw out all the sweet potato.
yeah, your cooking's really boring. And what we ended up doing is they would send me TikToks and Instagrams of these menus that they'd seen and these recipes that we ended up all cooking together and trying out. So, that was a great way for us as a family to teach our children, good ways of eating, but also having that in the back of our head, making sure that we were getting that variety in. And I think, I'm just conscious of time here, Dale, and I just want to make sure that we've talked enough about what I'm putting in my body, right? Where can people who are listening to this right now and going, well, I'm buggered. I haven't done all those things, right? He's got a head start. It's too late for me. I know that's not true. But where should they be looking at spending their time, their money, and their focus right now on nutrition?
Okay, so let's be real honest. I've worked with tens of thousands of people over the years, whether it's through clinic, whether it's through like media work or whatever. And the only thing that works if you want to make change is start where you are. You've touched on some important stuff. Don't try and be what already exists. Your day one, you're comparing your day one to someone's. I mean, I've been doing it since I was 15. I'm now 49, right? So that comparison is just going to kind of create ruin anyway. Just start with where you are. I will say to people, right, okay, what are your 5 favorite meals? And then figure out, right, okay, how can I upgrade those as much as possible? Let's say, for example, it's one of them is spaghetti bolognese. Right, like quite a common one. I personally think it's an abomination, but I mean that's a different conversation. Yeah, I've never got into it, but a lot of people love it. So it's like, right, okay, with your ragu, do it 50-50 with absolutely, like keep the steak in there. Don't go for any of the low fat rubbish either. Like a really good, decent fat percentage steak bits in there. But then maybe add some red lentils, have some very, very finely chopped carrot, finely chopped celery in there, some red onion, a few cloves of garlic, get some spinach and just cut it up really finely. And then when you throw it into the sauce, it will vaporize when you're cooking it anyway. So you're increasing the veg and the fiber. And then with the spaghetti, instead of the white version, swap it for the brown version. So you've got more fiber, you've got more density. I would say give your favorites a facelift. That way it's easier. That way you've got a framework that you know that you can actually enjoy. Because if you're eating like, burgers and pasta and I'm just like, yeah, mate, you've got to live on kale salad, you're going to tell me to foxtrot Oscar. It's like, you've got to make sure that it's realistic as well, because you can have the loftiest goals in the world, but if you've not got that execution tied to realistic steps and realistic processes, you're a coach. Like, do you know what I mean? Working with a client, it's just like you can have the best goal in the world, but you're not going to say, right, do that tomorrow. It's like, right, what does the journey look like to get there? Yeah. What are the hurdles that they come through?
And you've got to enjoy it, right? Because at the end of the day, if health is causing you stress or misery, it's not healthy.
It's not health. No, exactly. That's a crazy thing. It's just like, okay, so, and you know what? I've been there. When I first got into it, when I was in my teens, I got into it because I had really bad acne, and I did get obsessive to the point where I think I probably did skirt on the edge of orthorexia with it. Physically, I might have been like super healthy. If you would have looked at the blood work, I mean,
Mhm.
what, I was like kind of young anyway. That's the other thing that worries me about, by the way, especially with these conversations. You look on like Instagram and stuff like this, and like, this is all you need to do with your diet, and it's like, mate, you're 21. Of course you look good. Piss off and come back in 30 years. Then we'll have a little chat, shall we? But that drives me mad. Anyway, it's really easy to do that. You can be kind of doing everything all right, but if it's pressing on your mental health, if it's pressing on your social environment, all of a sudden no one's inviting you out, or no one's inviting you around for a dinner party, and you start to feel isolation, then it's like, well, another aspect of your life is actually starting to slide, and your health is being affected there. So you got that right. But look, when you take these small steps, if these small steps are consistent, and like, okay, so you've got your 5 favorite meals nailed, and you've improved them, and you've made the like healthier versions of those, like, right, what else could I do? Maybe can I add in a couple of pieces of fresh fruit in between meals? Can I add an additional 2 veg as side dishes to what I'm doing? Just
Mm.
choose one more thing. So that's the next thing that I say after people have given the favorites a facelift. It's like, right, from there, change one thing
Mm.
and do it over and over again until it becomes the norm, and then carry on doing that, and then do something else. It may seem like baby steps, but when you look back over like 6 or 12 months, you'll realize there's been some quite significant lifestyle change.
And I think that's it. It's a great place to leave it on there, actually, is A, give your favorites a facelift, but also remember, anyone listening to this, you didn't get to where you are right now overnight. You're not going to get to where you're going to overnight. And what you touched on there with the bolognese, even the chili for us, our children were like most children, not wanting too much veg and everything in there. So we literally did that with our ragu. We cooked off loads of different vegetables, blended it all, put it in with the sauce and that, and no one even noticed. And in fact, one time we did it with so many different veg that they thought it was the meat, and they just scoffed it down. And likewise with the chilies, you can put obviously the red kidney beans in, but we put lentils in as well. It bulks it out and everything like that. And it is really quite simple to do those basic facelifts, right?
Yep.
So Dale, firstly, thank you so much for taking the time out today. I've got one
Pleasure, my
final
friend.
question for
Okay.
you. Based on what you know about me and my nutrition, do you think I've got a chance to live to 100 healthily?
I think so, absolutely. Because you're bringing in another element of it that certainly isn't my area of expertise, but I try and incorporate it into my daily life, is that physical activity element. And you're clearly conscious of your emotional landscape.
Mm.
And because obviously, guys, I as Nick said, I've known Nick personally as well, so I can kind of figure out what's going on. So when you bring all of those factors together, then you stand a very, very good chance. And you're not doing any of these ridiculous diets. You're not like kind of eating 10 steaks a day. You're not an alligator. You're following some very strong evidence-based, simple approaches that are sustainable, that are micronutrient dense, that are supporting multiple aspects of metabolic health, supporting inflammatory response, all of the things that matter for healthy aging, and particularly the protein thing. Like, I'll leave you on this final little curveball, and we kind of spoke about it offline. Everyone obsesses, like, if you're a professional athlete, or you've got these kind of body recomposition goals, people are always like, oh yeah, like 1.5 to 2 grams of protein for every pound of body weight. That may well stack up for the perfect body fat percentage, or the perfect kind of response to your training in the gym when you're an athlete or whatever. If you're trying to age well, and if you're trying to push for longevity, you may want to revisit that, because you do get an increase in something called insulin-like growth factor. And insulin-like growth factor is wonderful for building muscle and all the rest of it, but it's also very good for building any other kind of tissue growth as well, such as the kind of growth that you don't want, if you know what I mean. Certain types of cancers. It is a driver of the pathophysiology of cancers. And there's a reason why the likes of Dr. David Sinclair and, Brian Johnson and all those kind of people are talking about that sort of stuff, of those more plant-centric diets, because it does reduce that IGF-1.
Do you know, I think that's a great point to leave it on, is like, don't get your nutritional advice and exercise advice and life advice from someone 20 years your junior. Get someone that's actually lived it, been there, right, knows. Because here's what I say to people, I went to a gym the other day and it was the personal trainer there was 30 and he's going, you should do this, you should do that. I said, my friend, I said, you have no idea what it feels like to be 40, let alone 50. All right. So I'm good. You're good. We're all good. And I
Yeah.
think that's it. We have to be mindful where we get our advice from. Dale?
Yeah, and also, look, it's not that I'm kind of dissing anyone like that, or or
Yeah.
trying to get arsy with anyone like that. It's just like sort of know the context of everything, and also like you say when they kind of insinuate that like their diet is the one that's going to give you the longevity, and like you say they're not even touched 30 yet. It's like, mate, I looked flipping amazing when I was in my 20s and in my early 30s. I
Yeah.
was like, I look at photos from like 15 years ago, and I was like, what the hell was I worried about?
Yeah.
You've got to realize that it's very easy to have that kind of vitality
Yeah.
when you're that young.
I think the main
As
thing here,
because I've got the big milestone next year. I've got the big 5-0
I know you
next year.
have. Looking
Like
forward to that
massive.
party.
God, yeah, that'll be interesting.
But
That'll
listen,
be
I
interesting. Put
think
the whole
cap
weekend off. Yeah.
off, just to cap off, everyone listening to this, do more good than not, right? Let health happen in the background, right? If it's stressing you out or overwhelming you, it's not healthy. And like Dale said right at the beginning of this podcast, stick to the basics. And those basics, by the way, were still the basics 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and they'll still probably be the basics in
10,000 years
10
ago,
years'
yeah.
time as well. So, Dale, thank you very much for
Pleasure.
helping me try to live to 100 healthily. Thank you very much.